Hi, everyone, and welcome to Penny for Your Thoughts, the Daily Pennsylvanian's official opinion podcast. So, we bring you the voices shaping campus perspectives, including the debates, questions, and everyday stories that matter the most to Penn students. So, my name is Mritika, and I am a junior here at Penn.
Hi guys, my name is Mia. I'm an opinion columnist here at the Daily Pennsylvanian.
Yes, and we are going to be speaking to you about our recent articles regarding Charlie Kirk's assassination last week.
For me, I wrote an article titled Political Violence Has No Place in Our Country. What was your article title?
Mine has not been published, so we are recording this on Thursday. But it is titled Penn Students Made Charlie Kirk's Murder About Themselves.
Yeah, do you want to elaborate a little bit more on yours?
Yes, so I guess that I was kind of inspired to write about this piece after a rather infamous Under the Button post that has since been deleted. So basically, this is, of course, the Daily Pennsylvanian satirical publication, and someone had written a piece headlined Charlie Kirk Loses Debate. And this was published after he was shot, but then before his death was official. And I personally know many people who viewed the DP as treating the article as something very facetious, especially when this man's life was on the line, and many of them reported it on Instagram, and of course soon it was taken down. And that reminded me a bit actually about how less than a year ago actually Luigi Mangione, 2020 engineering graduate here at Penn, was revealed as a suspect in killing United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. And soon after, there was an Under the Button headline along the lines of, I'm definitely not quoting this correctly, but something along the lines of Phi brother finally has a body count. So, of course, Phi was the frat that he was in during his time at Penn, and the body count is referring to Brian Thompson. And I think that title just struck out to me because I can't imagine someone right now treating Charlie Kirk as a frat party hookup in a satirical piece. I feel like that would not go down well. And so I was kind of curious about what causes that dissonance and how people view these two incidents.
Yeah, I think it speaks to larger issues of censorship. My piece is about how Charlie Kirk's assassination follows growing problems of divisive rhetoric. I think that the immediate reaction didn't really come from a place of people being upset necessarily that he was killed because it was a violent act, but more so politicizing it on both sides. I feel like the Republicans, at least in my opinion, kind of used it as an opportunity to immediately blame the left by being like, oh, this must have been, especially when we didn't know who the suspect was yet. I saw a lot of things online of them being like, oh, it must be an immigrant, or it must be a person of color, or it must be someone who's super far left, part of like the queer community, something of that nature, and using it to further divide. And then again, on the left, I also saw a lot of people kind of using it as a way to further issues of gun violence, which is something I brought up in my article. I talked about how it was a bit different. Like, this was a targeted attack. Like, an assassination attempt is a lot different than unregulated assault weapons in schools. I believe the exact gun used to kill Charlie Kirk was a hunting rifle with a scope on it, which is not really the main focus of anti-gun legislation. And so I found that immediately interesting because people on both sides used it as an opportunity to further their political goals rather than to sit back and be like, wow, what does this mean for broader American culture?
Yeah, that was definitely something that stuck out to me as well. I think what's interesting is that even now, of course, there is incriminating evidence for Teller Robinson, who is revealed as the gunman that killed Charlie Kirk. But we still don't really know much about his political views. Of course, there are many anecdotes about him moving further to the left. He had a transgender roommate. And so I think that many people are running with this narrative that he was a far left person who was very much influenced by mainstream media. I remember seeing a clip of, I think it was Batya Ungar Sargon, some commentator, but of course don't quote me on this, who said that recently much of the violence has been coming from the left. First it was Luigi, now it is Tyler Robinson. And what's kind of interesting is that especially Luigi was revealed as having quasi-right-wing views. He'd admired RFK Jr., he was anti-woke, he opposed DEI, and similarly, I feel like there is a lot of nuance to Tyler Robinson's views, and so for people to treat this as a narrative is incredibly misguided. So that's something that definitely resonated with me in your piece.
Yeah, I also saw that in yours too. And I think, speaking of funny, like satirical headlines, I saw an Onion headline today that was like, Tyler Robinson had a transgender Uber driver, like, oh my gosh. Because I think they are really trying. I saw on Fox News too that there was a headline about his roommate was transgender, and I think linking it to a group that a portion of America is already fearful of is kind of a way to, like, again, further it politically and divide. I think that my piece mainly focused on political polarization and how this issue should impact all Americans regardless of what side of the aisle you're on. I think that political violence should scare us all and should not just scare us when it's against our side.
Yeah, I think that a point that stood out to me in your piece was regarding this idea that if we kind of idolize his character, he'll soon become a right-wing martyr, and that will only grow support for his views. So I'm just curious about how you kind of came to that conclusion, because it is something I agree with, but...
Yeah, I saw online, immediately after he was shot, I saw that video. I don't know if you saw it, but it was something I wish I didn't see, and I think that for a lot of people, it was their first time seeing something that graphic, and it's very tragic and terrible. But something that struck me was a lot of people online, at least in my immediate circle, were saying, like, oh, he deserved it, or he had it coming, or, like, this is great because now his view won't be out there anymore. And I think that while a lot of the things he said I disagreed with, and I think a lot of what he said did qualify as, like, hate speech or, like, calls for, like, the ends to DEI, or, like, the theory that, like, minorities are trying to overtake the country and things like that, which I don't believe to be true and I think are very divisive in nature, but I don't think that means that someone deserves to die, and I also think that shouldn't be anyone's first reaction. And then even if you are in the political camp of I disagree with him, the point I was kind of trying to make is that unfortunately his views were not unique to him. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of conservative podcasters who also have big followings. For example, like Tucker Carlson or Ben Shapiro, Candace Owens. And those are people who I listen to. Like, I like to be, like, I would consider myself more left-leaning, but I do like to listen to people who are on all sides just to understand how people are feeling and what they're thinking. But his views were not unique to him, so I think that by assassinating him, whatever the motives of that person were, which we still don't know, it doesn't really do anything for the broader, like, political climate other than for people who are already on that side getting stronger in it, and people who are maybe, like, not convinced yet to be like, oh, well, there must have been some truth to what he was saying, because why else would someone want him to die? And I think, too, especially, like, Charlie Kirk was the founder of Turning Point USA. I'm from Arizona, so I have some friends who are in Turning Point. I've, like, seen the headquarters before.
Me too. I'm from South Carolina, so Charlie Kirk has come to my hometown many times.
Yes, yeah, and I think that was very, like, noble. Like, I'm glad that he, like, debated people and allowed for that open dialogue. And I think, too, that because he was, like, the founder of this rightward youth movement, a lot of people now are wanting to join that and kind of, like, take up his legacy. There was a guest column that ran alongside mine today in the print issue that was about that. It was about how, like, young conservatives and young people more broadly should not be scared to share their opinions and should kind of fill this void that has now been left by Charlie Kirk's passing. And so I think that it's hard for me to say, because one thing I do want there to be open, like, dialogue and people to be able to share their opinions in the public sphere, and I think that that's one of the beauties of America, is that we can say what we want to. Unfortunately, I think that has changed. Like, I don't think I can believe that statement so much anymore without fear of violence, because now obviously we've seen in multiple occasions throughout the years that violence can be inspired by people's, like, words. And I don't necessarily think that people on all sides are safe to like share what they want to say on like either side. But yeah, I think that this violent act has kind of polarized us, or I guess drawn more attention to the polarization that's already been brewing.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah. I got a lot of comments from like people on both sides of the aisle on my article, and it was interesting too because I got an email that was basically saying that I was wrong for what I was saying, and that Charlie Kirk, they were basically upset that I said he was right-wing in my introduction paragraph instead of saying he was a father, which I thought was interesting.
I saw a comment on Instagram along those lines as well, but yeah.
Might be the same person.
It was interesting to see because I do think that there's this, and this is something that I address in my piece, but there's this attempt to emphasize his identity as a father or a husband, which of course is true, if to, I guess, sanitize his image in a way that isn't applied to everyone equally. So I remember seeing a stat that was like 5 to 8 people in Philly die from gun violence every day on average, and I believe that there was a maximum of 20 individuals who died, and we're not emphasizing that they're parents or children or siblings. And so why is there a specific focus on this one public figure?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, and something that I kind of tried to address in my piece. I talked about how people had what I would call like a parasocial relationship with Charlie Kirk, whereas they thought they could identify with him and who he was. And I think that opposed to just everyday acts of like gun violence or things that we don't see, when you've been following someone for a few years and you feel like a personal connection to them, it can be easy. It's much easier to humanize them in that moment, and especially all these videos online of him and his family. And I think that is really tragic. And if anything, I wish that we would humanize people always, always recognize it rather than pick and choose when to stress those characteristics of someone. I think that in terms of like Charlie Kirk, he said a lot of things that, yes, I disagreed with, but I also think that humanizing someone after an incident like this can be good, but I also don't think we should lose sight of like what he stood for and what he said. But not at the expense of saying that like it was okay. And I think people were going a little bit too far as to be like, oh, because he said awful things, he deserved to die. Or I got an email from someone who was saying, so they were trying to draw a parallel between Charlie Kirk and like Hitler, and they were like, so you wouldn't be upset if Hitler was shot. Like, it's like the same thing. And I think it's very different. I think a podcaster is a lot different than a politician, and different than a dictator. And I think that he was debating people on public campuses around the country, and I don't think that's something that should stop. And something I also found really interesting just about all this is I was talking about the guest column that ran alongside mine that was basically encouraging students with differing viewpoints to share them and to share their opinions. And I also am a strong advocate of that. I think that if you believe something strongly, you should share it, and you shouldn't be afraid to share it. And that's something I've always done. Like, since I joined the DP my freshman year, I've always been involved in opinion. And I think sharing my opinion is something that is amazing and wonderful, and more people should do and like should feel safe to do, because our voices are the one thing that we have, and our perspectives and viewpoints really shape who we are. And I think sharing those is super impactful. But anyways, all that to be said, this guest columnist and I definitely disagreed on a lot of what we were saying. But I woke up to an email this morning from him that was like, hey, like my piece ran alongside yours, and while we may disagree on some things, I'm really glad that your perspective was in there. And I thought that was really kind. And I feel like we need more of that.
For sure. I think that oftentimes people view very politically opinionated individuals as a reference point for themselves. So being from the South, being from a largely conservative area, I personally know many people who viewed Charlie Kirk as kind of the manifestation of what they believed in. And I think that that's never a good thing. And because if you oppose those views, you're going to be against that person fundamentally. And so hearing about the individual, the guest columnist who replied to your post, I think was just an incredibly meaningful thing, because it's how we should be viewing people who voice their opinions publicly.
Yeah, and especially opinions that you disagree with. I
Yes.
think that with every individual that I've met, at least, even if I feel like at the beginning I disagree with everything they've said, there's at least some commonalities that we're able to find within each other. And I think really the only way forward is for us to collaborate positively, and be willing to learn and listen and change. Like, even my opinions are changeable. Like, sometimes people will read
Yes.
my pieces and get angry, and I'm like, okay, this is
Yes.
not fact. This is an opinion. Like, if you disagree, I'm happy to hear why. And maybe I'll change my mind. Like, no one's mind should be completely made up on any issue,
For
I
sure.
feel. So it's been very interesting, and I wish that more respectful dialogue would happen instead of shutting people down. Yeah.
With that, we will conclude this episode of Penny for Your Thoughts. But thank you for listening, and please go check out our articles. Mine is again titled "Penn Students Made Charlie Kirk's Murder About Themselves," and
Yes, and mine is titled "Political Violence Has No Place in Our Country."
but thank you so much for watching.